Hello again. I want to introduce another of the books of Sato's diaries that I've transcribed. And here it is, A Diplomat in Japan, Part 2, the diaries of Ernest Sato, 1870 to 1883. Okay, this is published by lulu.com. Okay, so it's available in paperback. And also there is a Kindle version. I'm pretty sure. Yes, I'm sure there is. I did the transcription and annotated it. So I wrote a preface, which I'm going to read, and then Sir Hugh Kortatsi, the late Sir Hugh Kortatsi, who died a couple of years ago, very kindly provided an introduction, and I'm going to read that as well, because it is a very good one. All right, here's the preface, which I wrote. Sir Ernest Sato, PC GCMG, 1843 to 1929, is best known for two books: his monumental and important handbook for diplomats, titled A Guide to Diplomatic Practice, first published during his retirement in 1917, which has gone through several revisions, with the sixth edition edited by Sir Ivor Roberts appearing this year. That was 2009. There's actually a seventh and now even an eighth edition is in press. And also A Diplomat in Japan, which first appeared in 1921. The latter volume is for the most part based closely on his diaries, he called them journals, for the period 1862 to 1869, with minor rewrites and alterations of wording here and there. It was translated into Japanese and has been a bestseller ever since it first appeared. It is still available as a popular paperback today, a testament to its perceived importance as a unique record written by a foreign observer in a privileged position of the major turning point in Japanese history, which was the end of the Tokugawa shogunate, the Bakumatsu, and the beginning of the Meiji period, the Meiji Ishin restoration. The present book is one which Sato never got round to publishing himself in his lifetime. It is in effect the sequel to A Diplomat in Japan, since it consists of his diaries for the period 1870 to 1883, when he was still serving in Japan. And so I believe that the title, A Diplomat in Japan, Part 2, is justified. Readers may feel that it is light on political matters as compared with accounts of travels in Japan, Germany, and Italy, and visits to concerts and other pleasures in London and Paris. Certainly, Sato seems to have had more time for touring Japan in a leisurely way than in the early days. In any case, it constitutes a fascinating and very detailed daily record, and it gives me great pleasure to be able to make this material more easily accessible, both to scholars and to the educated reading public. One can only assume and hope that this would have been in accordance with Sato's own wishes, as he caused all of his diaries and letters, the so-called Sato papers, reference PRO 30/33, to be deposited soon after his death under the terms of his will at the Public Record Office, now part of the National Archives of the UK. Ian Ruxton, August 2009. And now the introduction by Sir Hugh Kortatsi. Sato's diaries, 1870 to 1883. So Hugh was ambassador for 4 years at one point. In the distinguished career of Sir Ernest Sato, 1843 to 1929, the years 1870 to 1883 were an interlude during which he sometimes must have felt that he was marking time and making no progress in life. The 13 years covered by this diary came between the exciting time which Sato had experienced in the run-up to the Meiji Restoration of 1868, and which he described so graphically in his memoir, A Diplomat in Japan, London, 1921, and 1884, when he was appointed as Consul General in Bangkok and was set on a diplomatic career. As Japanese secretary with the local rank of second secretary, which was eventually accorded him, His work consisted largely of producing summaries of the limited Japanese press at the time, of translating official Japanese documents, and occasional interpreting. His hours in the legation chancery from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. were far from arduous, and as his diary reveals, he was able to get away from Tokyo for longish periods, enabling him to travel widely in central Japan at a time when traveling in the interior was difficult and time-consuming. His relations with Sir Harry Parkes, the British minister, were often difficult. Sir Harry was a hard taskmaster and was often intolerant and arrogant towards Japanese with whom he came in contact. Sato, who had a better understanding and sympathy with Japanese feelings than his boss, was inevitably critical of Parkes from time to time. But Parkes, whatever his failings, was astute and recognized Sato's abilities. As a result, Sato was able to attend some meetings from which, because of his relatively low diplomatic rank, he might have been excluded. Parkes also entrusted Sato with some delicate missions, such as that to Satsuma in 1877 and to Korea in 1879. We do not know what Parkes said about Sato to those in charge of personnel in the Foreign Office, as the records have long since been destroyed, but he must have reported favorably. Otherwise, Sato would not have been promoted to the post of Consul General in Bangkok and very exceptionally transferred from the Japanese consular service to the diplomatic service. Parkes was doubtless aware that Sato had a Japanese common law wife, and this fact was surely reported to the Foreign Office. This fact did not prevent his eventual promotion to become minister at Tokyo in 1895, although it may have delayed this appointment for a year or two, and subsequently as minister at Peking in 1900. Nor did it stand in the way of his appointments in the Order of St. Michael and St. George, in which he was eventually made a Knight Grand Cross, GCMG. These years may have been an interlude for Sato, but they were significant ones in the modernization of Japan. This was the era in which the leaders of the Meiji Restoration consolidated their hold on power, successfully destroyed the old feudal system, and established a unitary state. The modernization of the Japanese economy was begun, and a new legal framework developed. The regime faced various internal threats, culminating in the Satsuma Rebellion of 1877, and began to flex its muscles in relations with its Asian neighbors. The main aim of the regime in relation to the Western powers during this decade was the achievement of equality. This meant revision of the unequal treaties of 1858, and in particular, the removal of the extraterritorial rights in Japan of the treaty powers. This was not in fact achieved until the revised treaty was signed with Britain in 1894, but it was a major factor in Anglo-Japanese relations in these years. Much of the work of the legation was, however, taken up with aspects of the modernization of Japan, for which Japan employed many foreign advisors, about half of whom were recruited from Britain. Sato's diaries during this period do not provide a running commentary on the changes taking place in Japan, nor do they give a summary of Anglo-Japanese relations during this period. For this, the student must rely on the dispatches and letters from the legation at Tokyo, or as it was so often still termed, Yedo. The diaries are often tantalizing. The snippets of conversations make one wish that Sato had kept a full record. Only rarely does Sato reveal in his comments his real feelings and reactions to events. We hear nothing about his family life. He is thus generally discreet. He is not a latter-day Pepys, and any reader who expects to have a full and frank commentary on his life in Japan in the 1870s will be disappointed. This said, however, there is much of real interest to the student of Japanese history in the early Meiji period, and to anyone intrigued by the career of Ernest Sato. A large part of these diaries deals with the journeys which Sato made in Japan with various companions, including Francis Ottewell Adams, while he was Secretary of Legation, and with Lieutenant Hawes, with whom he produced the first guidebook to central Japan. We who have become used to modern Japanese roads and railways will wonder at the time and effort which Sato had to expend in traveling over relatively short distances. although those of us who reached Japan immediately after the end of the Second World War will recall the appalling state of Japanese roads in those days. Sato accomplished many of his journeys largely on foot, often in appalling weather, wet and cold, or steamy and beset by mosquitoes and horseflies. He mentions frequently that he had to rely on Japanese straw sandals, waraji. In a number of places, there were no bridges and they had to ford the river or be carried across. Alternative methods of transport apart from riding on horseback included the kago or palanquin or the newly introduced jinrikisha. The inns varied in quality and comfort. Once or twice he found that they lacked even tatami mats. He did, however, allow himself the comfort of a European pillow, which he took with him, and 2 cheroots each day. The food, too, left much to be desired. Sometimes they were lucky if they could even find any eggs. They sometimes had a supply of Liebig's extract with them, but more often relied on fish caught in local streams. Sato was not a wealthy man and no doubt had to count his pennies. Prices in sen may seem minute to us today, but they have to be seen in the context of the low cost of living at the time and the general poverty of the Japanese peasantry. Some of the rickshaw and kago bearers were a rough lot and bargained hard. The travelers often needed guides who were also of varying ability and limited local knowledge. These diary entries should be compared with the accounts given in the Handbook for Travelers in Central and Northern Japan, produced by Sato and Hawes and first published in 1881. This was the basic volume which developed into the various editions of Murray's Guide to Japan. Sato's diary also covers visits to Kyoto, which he got to know well. On the 27th of December 1872, he records a visit to the Kabuki at the Minamiza, to which he repaired at 3 in the morning. He bought many additions to his library of Japanese books in Kyoto. He also visited Nikko and Lake Chuzenji more than once. The diary includes an account of climbing Mount Fuji with his friend Frederick Victor Dickens, as well as of visits to other mountains in what came to be called the Japanese Alps. Sato was clearly a knowledgeable, if amateur, botanist. His frequent descriptions of flowers and plants are worthy of study by a modern plants man. It is interesting to read that bears as well as wild boars were often encountered. Important Japanese with whom Sato records contacts include, among others, such leading figures as Saigo Takamori Kichinosuke, Iwakura Tomomi Katsukaishu Awa no Kami, Ito Hirobumi, Okubo Toshimichi, Kido Takayoshi, Terashima Munenori, and Prince and Princess Higashi Fushimi. But sadly, one only rarely do his comments reveal new sidelights on them and their attitudes. Sato was with some of them at geisha parties, where they relaxed in the childish atmosphere which marks so many such occasions even today. Sato's account of a race meeting on the 5th of November 1871 is an example where one wishes that Sato had had a camera. When he returned to Japan from Europe in January 1877, reaching Nagasaki on the 28th of January, he found a letter from Sir Harry Parkes and began his journey to Kagoshima in Satsuma, where his old friend, Dr. William Willis, was working as a doctor and training Japanese medical students. The Satsuma Rebellion was beginning. Sato's journey was tough and dangerous, and he did not reach Yokohama until the 7th of March. The account of this journey is one of the highlights of these diaries. Parkes and he dined with Iwakura on 9th of March, 1877, and Sato was able to describe the orderly conduct of the rebels, both in the town and on the march. On the 19th of March, Parkes and he visited Terashima at the Foreign Office. In reply to questions from the chief, he, Terashima, seemed to imply that the government would not be in a hurry to offer an amnesty, and when Sir Harry said he hoped it would not be necessary to cut off Saigo's head, he preserved a dignified silence. On the 24th of March, Parkes took Sato with him to call on Iwakura, who thought that there would be some hard fighting shortly. When, on the 31st of March, Sato called on Katsuawa, the latter said that the successes reported on the side of the government are all moonshine. As the account of this conversation given by Sato makes clear, Katsu was sympathetic with the rebels and wished that Sahari could find an opportunity of interposing with friendly advice to prevent further bloodshed. Having written over 20 years ago a biography of Dr. William Willis in Japan, that's Hugh Kotatsi, was glad to see Sato's account of the farewell dinner for Willis at the Grand Hotel in Yokohama on the 7th of July, and to note the tribute to him from Dr. Hebburn, who all students of Japan know for his system of Romanization. The account which Sato gives of his visit to Korea in late 1878, see entries beginning on 13th of November 1878 to 2nd of December 1878, is also of particular interest as it underlines how cut off Korea was at that time, even from China and Japan. The fact that Sato was given this task confirms that Parkes, even if he did not like Sato, appreciated his abilities. Parkes was away on leave following the death of his wife when the young princes Arthur and George, later King George V, visited Japan in HMS Bacante. The official account is contained in the cruise of Her Majesty's ship Bacante, 1789 to 1882, compiled by John N. Dalton, London, 1886. Sato was deputed to go with them to the Kansai. His account of the visit, 24th of October 1881 to 11th of November, and his involvement is discreet. Although he notes on the 6th of November that after dinner there were dramatic performances, but Prince George made me come over and sit by him while he had a tiger tattooed on his arm, and I lost it all. For further details about royal tattoos, see Japanese Tattooists and the British Royal Family by Noboru Koyama in Britain and Japan, Biographical Portraits, Volume 6, edited by Hugh Kotatsi, Global Oriental, 2007. Sato had 2 sets of leave in Europe during these years. There are only occasional references to Japan in his diaries of his European tours. One account of a conversation at the Foreign Office, 13th of September 1876, reveals not only his doubts about Parkes, but also his hopes for eventual revision of the treaties. The main interest of these entries lies in its reflection of Sato's cultural interests. Like many Europeans who have immersed themselves in Japan, he longed for elements of European civilization. He was thus an avid visitor to museums such as the Uffizi in Florence. He particularly longed to hear good classical music, and his diary contains accounts of many concerts which he attended and enjoyed. Music remained a favorite pursuit back in Japan also, where he played pieces with European friends such as Mrs. Aston. We have to remember that in those days, there were none of the concerts or performances that are so frequent in Japan today, nor were there yet galleries or exhibitions of Western art. Students of Japanese history, of Anglo-Japanese relations, and of Ernest Sato should be grateful to Ian Ruxton for all his efforts in transcribing and making available the text of these diaries. Hugh Kotatsi, August 2009. Well, there we are. So that's the introduction to this book, written by Sir Hugh. And this one is quite reasonably affordable, I think, if you would be interested in purchasing a copy. Thank you very much for listening. Bye.